is a vital part of delivering the UK's international obligations under the BBNJ agreement. It will strengthen the global framework for protecting biodiversity in areas of the ocean beyond national jurisdiction, improve how we manage environmental impacts in these areas, and help ensure that the benefits arising from marine genetic resources are shared fairly. I am pleased to inform the House that as of the 17th of January, the BBNJ agreement has now entered into force. Following royal assent of this bill and subsequent secondary legislation, which will be passed in the coming months, the UK will ratify the agreement and intends to play a leading role at the first Conference of the Parties, which will take place at some point before the 16th of January 2027. Turning to the amendments from the other place. Today the House is asked to consider a package of 12 amendments, all of which were put forward by the Government. These amendments relate to devolution and are designed to support effective implementation of the BBNJ agreement across the whole of the United Kingdom, while respecting the devolution settlements and ensuring that devolved ministers are appropriately engaged where devolved competence is affected. I'm very happy to give way.
Speaker, can I thank the Minister for what the Minister is putting forward. I know that Part 2 of the bill contains a specific exception for fishing and that the new regulations do not apply to the use of a UK craft for fishing if it is done under a valid licence under the Fisheries Act 2020. I've been contacted by some of the organisations back home in Northern Ireland, and so does the Minister not agree that it's essential that the devolved administrations enshrine this in acknowledging that the fishing industry is reliant on the ability to continue to fish in all current areas? In other words, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's important that the administrations, the Northern Ireland Assembly in particular, does what this bill says, because if it doesn't do that, then the Northern Ireland fishing organisation will find themselves at a disadvantage. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for his question. It is indeed important that all our devolved administrations, as well as the UK government, are abiding by the agreement, and I thank him for his interest and his engagement in this important bill. I am really grateful as well to those, to all of those who we have been engaging with through the passage of this bill. And working closely with ministers and officials in the devolved governments, we agreed at the introduction of the bill that legislative consent motion that the legislative consent motion process is engaged for Scotland and Northern Ireland to varying extents by Part 2, 3 and 4 of the bill. The Government has been in sustained discussions with both of these devolved governments to seek consent for the bill, and I can confirm to the House that motions on consent have been passed by the Scottish Parliament and the Northern Ireland Assembly. Lord's Amendments 1 and 4 provide Scottish ministers and Northern Ireland Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs with concurrent powers to make regulations within devolved competence corresponding to the powers to make provision granted to the Secretary of State under Clause 9 and Clause 11 of the bill. Amendments 2 and 5 provide the procedure for those powers.
As one understands it, the BBNJ is dealing with matters primarily in international waters, and of course devolved institutions have no say in those matters. So as to broaden an understanding of the bill, what type of regulations is it anticipated that DERA, the local stormont department, would be making in consequence of this bill?
I thank the honourable member, and what I will say is that following the ratification of agreement, that we will be participating in the future discussions in relation to the implementation of the agreement, and there will continue to be further conversations. I think the important point I do want to make, and I think this is relevant for the work we've been doing with Scotland, with Wales and with Northern Ireland, is that it does reflect how our UK government officials and devolved officials are already working together effectively in practice, and including in relation to consultation and effective delivery. And I know that these will be conversations that do continue. If I can continue with my remarks, Madam Deputy Speaker, in relation to Amendments 3 and 6, these place a duty on the Secretary of State to consult Scottish ministers and the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs in Northern Ireland before exercising powers in clauses 9 and 11, where regulations engaged devolve matters. This duty does not apply where the Secretary of State considers that regulations need to be made urgently for the purposes of implementing emergency measures adopted under Article 24(1) of the BBNJ agreement. This approach ensures that devolved governments are engaged in advance of regulations being made, enables them to make their own provision on devolved aspects where they wish to do so, and reflects their responsibilities while supporting timely and effective implementation of the agreement. Lord's Amendment 7, I will give way.
Shannon.
Speaker, the reason why I'm asking, because I've been asked these questions by the fishing organisations back home, I want to put them on the record, and I wish to just very quickly. The bill enables the creation of internationally agreed MPAs in the high seas. If a Northern Ireland vessel operates in these international waters, it may face new restrictions on where it can fish to protect vulnerable habitats and species like sharks and whales. Does the Minister not agree that we need to ensure that MPAs are not created without the fishing industry, that's the sector itself, the fishing organisations, the fish producers, and that their opinions carry weight and not simply just a checkbox exercise? I just want to put it on record, please, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member, and indeed he does continue to put on the record his concerns, and he will know that as we move forward following ratification, there will be detailed conversations we will continue to have, and it is important that that the rules and regulations as we move forward will also be clear for all to be operating by. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was just referencing our approach and how we've been moving forward on the bill, and to ensure that devolved governments are engaged in advance of regulations being made, and that does enable them to be able to make their own provision on devolved aspects where they may wish to do so. And we continue to work closely together to support timely and effective implementation of the agreement. Lord's Amendment 7 inserts a new clause after Clause 17 that makes changes to the Marine Works Environmental Impact Assessment Scotland Regulations 2017 to ensure that the UK meets its obligations under the BBNJ agreement in relation to the Scottish marine licensable activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction. The UK Government will be amending its own environmental impact assessment regulations, and Scottish Government officials have worked closely with UK counterparts to draft corresponding provisions. Accordingly, Amendments 8 and 9 also limit the power in Clause 18 to only implementing Article 38 standards or guidelines, as a wider power is no longer required in light of other changes that will be made directly through the bill. Lord's Amendments 10 and 11 ensure that under Clause 22, which sets out procedures for the making of regulations under the Act, does not apply to regulations made under clauses introduced by Lord's Amendments 1 and 4. Instead, the procedures set out in Government Amendments 2 and 5 respectively apply. Finally, Lord's Amendment 12 amends Clause 25 so that the clause introduced by Amendment 7 comes into force on such a day as the Secretary of State appoints by regulations rather than upon royal assent. This change ensures a consistent approach across the bill with regards to the environmental impact assessment regulations that are being amended. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government's objective is to implement the BBNJ agreement effectively across the whole of the United Kingdom, and to do so in a way that respects the devolution settlement and supports continued constructive collaboration with devolved governments. I therefore commend these 12 Lords' amendments to the House, and I urge members to support them. I beg to move.
The question is that this House agrees with the Lords and their Amendment 1. I call the Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. We on this side of the House recognise the importance of the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Bill and the shared international ambition to protect the world's oceans and marine ecosystems. The opposition supports the principle of effective global cooperation in this area, and we want this legislation to succeed. However, it is precisely because of the bill's significance, its reach across devolved administrations and its potential financial and regulatory consequences that it demands the highest standards of scrutiny and clarity. It is in that constructive spirit that I wish to raise a number of questions for the Minister today. I hope in the same constructive spirit she seeks to answer them fully. We know that the Government tabled quite a number of amendments to the bill at report stage in the House of Lords. Those amendments are before us today. I must say it is rather disappointing that the Government needed to do this at such a late stage in the bill's passage, and as my noble friend Lord Callanan said in the other place, tabling amendments at such a late stage was not conducive to the best Lord's scrutiny. Does the Minister accept that the work with the devolved administrations, which led to the tabling of these amendments, should have taken place earlier? And are lessons going to be learned for future legislation? On the new clauses, on the clauses consultation with Scotland and Northern Ireland to be inserted after clauses 9 and 12, can the Minister confirm that this definitely does not stray into legislative consent territory? Can the Minister also set out what would happen if Scottish or Northern Irish ministers do not approve of measures during the consultation process? Regarding the new clause to be inserted after clause 12 relating to the new regulation-making power, what would happen if, say, the Scottish Government decided to take a divergent path or set up a system that puts itself at odds with the UK Government position? Is there a risk to the operability of the system here? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government's own impact assessment found that this bill will generate compliance costs for those involved in the collection and utilisation of marine genetic resources and related digital sequence information. What steps are the Government taking to ensure that these costs aren't prohibitive to the very research we are hoping to promote through the bill? While there are still many unanswered questions about enforcement, it is hard to see how the compliance, licensing and enforcement will be cheap. What level of resource is going to be put in to enforcing the regime? A Ways and Means resolution is required for this bill precisely because it will lead to costs to the public purse. So what assessment has the Government made of the value for money in this respect, and what is the cost-benefit ratio? The final stage impact assessment also makes reference to potential future costs if emergency legislation is needed to respond to any further decisions by the Convention of Biological Diversity. Can the Minister clarify the parameters here? What it is they are anticipating, how much money do they assess might be involved, and are they planning to ensure the risk of unintended consequences is mitigated? Finally, it would be impossible not to mention the tension between the Government's ambitions with this bill and its surrender of the Chagos Islands, which may well see the dismantling of an exemplar marine protected area. Can she tell us exactly what undertaking Mauritius has given to the MPA? Any red lines the government has clearly set out, and precisely what continuing role Britain will play in MPA management per terms of the treaty. For example, has the government had any discussions about preventing damaging Chinese trawler boats from accessing the MPA? Madam Deputy Speaker, we all share the objective of protecting our oceans and safeguarding biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. Indeed, that is why it was a Conservative government that first signed up to the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. But good intentions on their own are not enough. This House is entitled to clear answers on scrutiny, devolution, operability, cost, enforcement and value for money, as well as honesty about how this bill sits alongside the government's wider actions on marine protection in the British overseas territories. Until ministers can provide that clarity and reassurance, there remains a real risk that a bill designed to lead internationally will instead create uncertainty at home. I urge the Minister to fully respond to the questions raised today so that the House can be confident that this legislation is workable, proportionate and worthy of the ambitions the government has for it.
Chair of the Select Committee, Toby Perkins.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome this bill, the introduction of which had the happy coincidence of fulfilling one of the government's commitments and satisfying one of the Environmental Audit Committee recommendations at the same time. This landmark legislation will lay the groundwork for protecting the marine environment and the wildlife that inhabit it, which lie beyond the control of individual nations. As the government's National Security Assessment on Global Biodiversity Loss, published last week, set out in stark terms natural ecosystems such as the ocean and the Amazon rainforest are at risk of collapsing. The resulting crop failures, intensified natural disasters and conflict and political instability are highly likely, the report said, to threaten UK national security and prosperity. It is vital that the UK take leadership on the international stage to tackle global biodiversity loss and climate change. I welcome this government's commitment to multilateral cooperation on ocean governance, and I look forward to this bill receiving royal assent, enabling the UK to ratify the BBNJ agreement. It's absolutely true to say that the initial indication of the government supporting this agreement was made by the previous government. And I think it was disappointing that over the 18 months or so after that commitment was made, that we never actually got the legislation back here. And so I welcome the fact that this government has taken forward this important measure. The UK also makes an important contribution to global efforts to halt environmental decline through its international funding for climate finance, 1/3 of which is earmarked for nature-based solutions to climate change. However, to date, there has been limited indication of the government's next steps regarding the next 5-year ICF budget due to commence in April. And the government has also failed so far to invest in the Tropical Forests Forever facility and leverage further private finance into that innovative fund, protecting forests in perpetuity. So whilst the Minister has rightly championed our contribution to this impressive act of international cooperation, does she agree that we have more to do to ensure that we retain the UK's hard-earned reputation as a global leader in the field of international climate action? Can the Minister confirm that the UK will continue to contribute to protecting and restoring global ecosystems by maintaining its international funding for climate, including for nature projects in the next round of funding? So, in summary, Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome this important legislation that this government has acted on where previous governments merely talked about it, and look forward to them to continuing in this positive direction on the other areas I referred to.
Hear, hear, hear.
I call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Rose Savage.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Liberal Democrats strongly welcome this bill, and it's wonderful to hear the support for it from across this House. The Global Oceans Treaty is one of the most significant environmental agreements of our time. It is currently the world's only viable pathway to meeting the global 30 by 30 target to protect at least 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. And the scale of that challenge is monumental. Right now, less than 1% of the high seas is fully protected. That's less than 1 penny in the pound of the global ocean. And this is the gap that this treaty begins to close. The ocean underpins everything. It feeds billions of people, absorbs around a quarter of global carbon emissions, regulates our weather and supports livelihoods across the world. Yet it's under extraordinary and growing pressure from overfishing, plastic pollution and climate change. I've seen those pressures firsthand. Rowing solo across 3 oceans, I saw both the beauty of the high seas and the damage that we're doing to them. Out there beyond national borders, it can also feel beyond human laws. But this treaty is about bringing rules, responsibility and stewardship to those waters, and also discharges one of the commitments made by this government to me during the discussions around my private member's bill, the Climate and Nature Bill, and for that I thank them. While we, as Liberal Democrats, welcome the bill, we do regret the delay. The UK helped to negotiate this agreement, and it would have been fitting if we'd been among the first to ratify, rather than trailing behind. I want to thank the campaigners who've kept up the pressure, and colleagues from across my party who've long championed ocean protection, including the Honourable Member for Bath, who's consistently made the case for stronger high seas governance, as has the Honourable Member for South Cambridgeshire.
Will she give way?
I will give way.
I thank her for giving way. I, like her, have spent quite a lot of time on the ocean, not rowing, but sailing. And when one sails across the oceans in small boats, one can't help but see seas of plastic, whether left by fishermen or just thrown overboard, carried on currents. Does she feel that this treaty goes far enough to tackle the scourge of plastic pollution in our oceans?
I thank my honourable and gallant colleague for his intervention. This treaty does not yet go far enough on plastic pollution, and I hope that the countries of the world will bring their best endeavours to achieve an international agreement on plastic pollution. Sadly, so far, those negotiations have not succeeded. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognise the serious, constructive work of our Liberal Democrat peers. They chose not to delay ratification, but they did work hard to strengthen the bill. Lord Teverson pressed ministers on enforcement gaps, flags of convenience, illegal fishing and human rights at sea, reminding us that the high seas cannot be a legal vacuum for either nature or people. And Baroness Miller of Chilthorne-Domer pushed strongly on plastic pollution, especially plastic pellets that now turn up throughout the marine food chain. These issues have not gone away, and they now form the implementation agenda. As Lord Teverson observed during the Lords' debates, this may be one of the last major environmental agreements that we see from the United Nations for some time, given this era when respect for international law appears to be under strain in a way that we haven't seen for many decades now. That makes this treaty not just important, but precious. We are under a moral and existential obligation to make it work. So this ratification must be the start, not the finish. If the UK wants to lead, the government should aim to arrive at the first conference of the parties with a clear plan for implementation, which I would like to suggest to the Minister should include the publication of a proper implementation roadmap with timelines, responsibilities and funding so delivery does not drift. We should back our world-leading scientific institutions such as the National Oceanography Centre, the British Antarctic Survey and the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science. They should be fully supported to provide the evidence, training and technology transfer on which this treaty depends. We should strengthen enforcement using our satellite monitoring capability and our experience monitoring vast protected areas in the overseas territories. And as a priority, we should get our own maritime house in order. We cannot, in good conscience, call for protection overseas while allowing destructive practices like bottom trawling in our own MPAs. Credibility must start at home. And at a time when multilateral cooperation often feels fragile, this treaty shows what is still possible when countries work together to protect the global commons. The Liberal Democrats will support this bill, but future generations will not judge us on whether we ratified a treaty. They will judge us on whether the oceans are healthier because we did something. So let's match warm words with hard action and show that Britain still leads when it matters, not just signing agreements, but protecting the blue parts of our planet, which give us food to eat and oxygen to breathe. To quote Sir David Attenborough, who turns 100 this coming May, if we save our sea, we save our world. Thank you.
Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As Chair of APPGs for the Ocean, I am delighted to see the bill's swift passage through Parliament, and I look forward to its full ratification. But I've got some specific points from the Minister. Can the Minister outline the timeline for the next steps to ensure ratification? Specifically, will it happen ahead of the first Ocean COP expected later this year? If the Minister is unable to detail today, would she be willing to meet with the APPG for the Ocean to discuss the timeline, particularly given that we are now 5 years away from our 30 by 30 commitment? Turning to the amendments laid in the other place, I note that the noble Baroness Lady Boycott put forward an amendment that would have ensured that the polluter pays and precautionary principles, alongside other principles in the Environment Act 2021, must be applied by UK authorities when they exercise powers or duties relating to the high seas under this bill. As the amendment did not pass, there are concerns across the ocean sector that there is no statutory requirement in the bill itself to extend these environmental principles beyond the UK's territorial or domestic jurisdiction. I wonder if the Minister is able to comment on that. Can the Minister offer assurances that when representatives of the government or public authorities act under this bill in relation to the high seas, they will apply the UK's existing environmental principles so that we do have that coverage? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I also thank honourable members for their contributions. If I could make a couple of comments in relation to the matters raised about the timing of the amendments in the other place. I think firstly to mention that discussions were continuing to be ongoing with our devolved governments as well about how we would be moving forward on the bill together. And it is important to recognise the respect for devolution settlements and adherence also to principles underpinning the Sewell Convention that are the core aims of this government and how we're working. And so I referenced the way in which we've been working closely with Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as we move forward. And that was part of the reason for some of the delays in order to get those agreements for how we move forward together. If I may also make reference, or I'll just make another reference, if I may also make reference to the importance of needing to move ahead quickly with this bill to ensure that we have a seat at the table for discussions with other parties to the agreement, including on MPAs. And we also wanted to ensure the bill's provisions in devolved areas were watertight. And that's why we had those constructive conversations with devolved governments. If I could just make a reference as well in relation to fishing. Part 2 obligations do not apply to fishing, but I know the honourable member has left his place, but he can reassure that the Northern Ireland Assembly will have concurrent powers to implement provision in areas of devolved competence. and in Part 3 of the bill, the UK will be involved in MPA decisions and will carefully consider the impacts on fishing. In relation to comments that were raised in regard to multilateral cooperation, I do want to mention some of the ways in which we continue to work with other states to support ratification. We continue to be proactive in preparing for implementation of the BBNJ agreement and are committed to partnering with others, including with the Global South, to ratify and to implement the agreement. And indeed, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office has worked with the Commonwealth Secretariat to support smaller member countries with their implementation work. And the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs also published research to develop a shortlist of potential area-based management tools, including marine protected areas that could be proposed once the agreement is in force. I was asked as well by the honourable member, my honourable friend, the honourable member for Rotherham, about the process of the bill. I made some remarks, but I may, with permission, make some further remarks in relation to this. Following the passage of the bill, we will be laying two statutory instruments, one of which will define digital sequence information for the purposes of the BBNJ Act, and the other, along with an associated Scottish Government SI, will amend the marine licensing regime where needed to implement Part 4 of the BBNJ agreement on environmental impact assessments. These will be progressed as soon as the BBNJ bill has received royal assent. And once these SIs have been passed, we will be able to ratify the agreement and do so by laying the instrument of ratification formally at the United Nations in New York. We are keen to see this happen as quickly as possible, as I know my honourable friend is as well. I do just want to make a reference to the legislative consent motions, and I think the Shadow Minister did ask about this in his remarks, and to say that yes, while foreign affairs and treaty making are reserved matters, implementing international obligations in domestic law is not reserved where those obligations concern devolved areas. Several provisions in the bill, particularly those in relation to parts 2, 3 and 4, relate to matters such as environmental protection and scientific research, which fall within the devolved competence in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and consequently the legislative consent motion process is engaged to varying degrees. And it has been the case that the assessment of whether the legislative consent motion is required for this bill has been agreed across the relevant UK government departments, including Scotland, Northern Ireland and Welsh offices, and in consultation with the devolved governments. Now, the Honourable Member also, the Shadow Minister, the Honourable Member also asked if there is a risk that requirements for an environmental impact assessment in Scotland for marine activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction might be different to one in other parts of the United Kingdom. It is the case that Scotland could choose to implement the requirements slightly differently, and we will be continuing to work closely with the Scottish Government to ensure that differences are kept to a minimum and that the United Kingdom as a whole is taking a consistent approach. What I will say is that is very much in the spirit in which we have been working collaboratively to respect devolution settlements, but recognise the importance of this agreement to both the Scottish Government and also to the United Kingdom Government. And I think that that has been an important part of how we've progressed. I will give way very quickly.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. On that point of, and I thank the Minister for answering the question that I raised around the potential for the Scottish Government to take a divergent way in the way that they implement this. If ongoing Conversations are underway. Can the Minister indicate whether there has been an indication given from the Scottish Government that they are in fact going to want to implement this in a slightly or more different way?
I thank the honourable member for his question. What I will say is that we are at the start of the process, and the spirit in which we have been working and the way in which we have reached agreement on how to be working alongside the Scottish Government is an important principle of how we would continue to work going forward. And I do believe, in light of those conversations, that a collaborative approach will continue, because that is in all of our interests as well. If I could just make some further comments in relation to the honourable member speaking for the Liberal Democrats, the honourable member for South Cotswolds. If I can make a reference to plastic pollution, I think it's important to reference this. It is important to, I know, members on all sides of the House, that there is a separate process underway to agree a global plastic pollution treaty. And plastic pollution is a transboundary issue with its source on land, with its and it is appropriate for this to be addressed by a bespoke treaty that can address the full life cycle of plastics, and including phasing out problematic products, improving waste management and reducing leakage. The BBNJ agreement focuses on conservation and sustainable use of resources in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and therefore is not best suited to address plastics pollution across the life cycle. But she makes an important point, and it is a matter of concern across the House. I will say as well, I will give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you to the Minister. I very much welcome the Government's commitment to global leadership on protecting the oceans by bringing forward this bill and so quickly through Parliament. Last week I joined Greenpeace on board their vessel Witness, which is docked nearby in London, and heard about the devastation that bottom trawling can wreak on marine ecosystems. Can the Minister outline what steps the Government is taking to regulate, or preferably to ban, this destructive fishing practice in our marine protected zones and elsewhere, as it is a particular area of concern for my residents in Exeter?
I thank my honourable friend, and it is indeed a matter of concern as it has been raised in debates across the House. And whilst he will know that bottom trawling is not within the scope of the agreement, separately he will also, I think, be aware that we are consulting on restricting bottom trawling in more vulnerable marine habitats. And it is important that that consultation and that work continues. I will just come to a conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, to say that this is a landmark piece of legislation. It does ensure that the UK can ratify the important BBNJ agreement and take full part in the Conference of the Parties. It contains measures that will not only safeguard marine ecosystems, they will also deliver real benefits for the UK's research and innovation community. In January, I was also pleased to visit the National Oceanography Centre, which the Honourable Member also referenced in her comments. I visited them in Southampton, a world-leading institution which highlighted the value of this agreement in improving the visibility and the transparency of UK-led marine research, as well as strengthening international research collaborations. And I do want to put on record my thanks to them for their work and their leadership. And to conclude, I am sure that honourable members would agree that the health of our ocean is inseparable from the health of our planet. And although we may not often see these ecosystems with our own eyes, the responsibility to protect them falls on all of us and on the wider international community. The BBNJ bill is the UK's opportunity to rise to that responsibility, to safeguard fragile ecosystems, to support sustainable development, and to ensure that the benefits of ocean science are shared fairly and responsibly. The United Kingdom has always played a leading role in advancing global ocean governance. With this bill, we have the chance to continue that leadership. The ocean cannot wait, and nor, Madam Deputy Speaker, should we.
The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their Amendment 1. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. With the leave of the House, I call the Minister to move that this House agrees with their Lords in their Amendments 2 to 12. The question is that this House agrees with the Lords in their Amendments 2 to 12. As many as of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 3 on business of the House today. Minister to move.
Move for.
The question is as on the order paper. The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the 2 motions on the high-speed rail Crewe to Manchester bill, which will be debated together. I call the Minister to move the first motion on carryover.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The motions we have before us today are vital for the delivery of the high-speed rail Crewe to Manchester bill. It's important that I am clear at the outset as to what these motions do and what they don't. This is categorically not about reinstating HS2 north of the West Midlands, nor are these motions about addressing the longer-term capacity constraints of the West Coast Main Line between Manchester and Birmingham. Instead, these motions are simply focused on ensuring that the government follows the speediest and most logical consenting route to progressing plans for a new rail line between Liverpool and Manchester, a line which will also call at Warrington and Manchester Airport. This new line, connecting 2 great cities of the north of England, is part of the second phase of Northern Powerhouse Rail that this government committed to last month. Before turning to why it is important to maintain momentum with this bill via these motions today, it may be helpful if I set out a brief history of this bill's passage. Honourable members will recall that in His Majesty's most gracious speech, this government announced our commitment to carrying over this bill from the previous Parliament. This is a government that recognises the importance of rail infrastructure in driving economic growth, enhancing productivity and unlocking opportunity in all parts of the country. The bill itself is the mechanism by which planning consent for the eastern part of the new route between Liverpool and Manchester can be granted. Given our ambitions for the north of England, it is important we crack on and get it done. That's why I will give way.
Thank you, Secretary of State, for giving way. The classification of the Northern Powerhouse Rail as an England-Wales project is short-changing Wales £1.5 billion, or up to £1.5 billion. Plaid Cymru is clear that we need an immediate devolution of rail to end this funding scandal, and even the Labour First Minister of Wales has also claimed that she wants rail devolved. So can the Secretary of State tell me how many official requests has the Welsh Government made for the devolution of rail in Wales?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I speak constantly with my counterpart in the Welsh Government, Ken Skates. We have a very good collaborative working relationship, and I would simply remind the Honourable Lady that this government in the spending review last year committed £445 million to Welsh Rail, a very, very significant investment which is going to result in improved stations, more reliable, more frequent services for the people of Wales, and it rights that historic lack of investment that Wales has seen. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was explaining why it's so important that we bring these motions today and maintain momentum in gaining planning consent for a new rail route between Liverpool and Manchester. We need to reconstitute the Hybrid Bill Select Committee with membership determined in the usual way, and we need to provide for carryover of the bill between sessions. This bill was first introduced in Parliament in January 2022. Since then, the purpose of it has been refined. It was initially intended to provide powers for both HS2 from Crewe to Manchester, as well as a section of the MPR route that would deliver east-west connectivity. The previous government's Network North announcement in October 2023 cancelled high-speed rail north of the West Midlands, so the HS2 element of the bill was no longer required. With the support of local leaders in May 2024, just before the last general election, this House passed an instruction that the bill should be adapted to focus on delivering the section of Northern Powerhouse Rail into Manchester. This is the bill that is now before us. All elements of the bill that pertain to sections of the route south of Millington will be removed. It is the government's intention to table an amendment to formally remove these powers during the Select Committee. This bill will, however, obtain the necessary powers to deliver the section of Northern Powerhouse Rail into Manchester via Manchester Airport. This will include new stations at Manchester Piccadilly and Manchester Airport itself. We are now seeking to progress this bill to make the best use of the significant progress it has already made. This government is investing up to £45 billion to deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail, transforming intercity rail in the north and driving economic growth. Northern Powerhouse Rail will ensure that the people of the north no longer have to tolerate second-rate rail infrastructure. We are delivering a turn-up-and-go railway where missing one train no longer means waiting an hour for the next. That means more frequent and reliable commuter services will be the norm. This will help more people access good jobs, will lead to more housing and offer greater opportunities for businesses to expand. I give way.
When it comes, first of all, I welcome the government setting out the plan and the economic boost that will bring and the purpose behind it, and there's nobody here who could say that was wrong. But I'm just concerned about the acquisition of land. The National Farmers Union, for instance, have indicated that they have some concerns over the acquisition of land, and farmers and landowners, it's a country landowners association as well, the two of them together have some concern over the acquisition of land to enable this project to go ahead. Can the Secretary of State assure me that the National Farmers Union and the Country Landowners Association, who represent a great many people and whose members' land may have to be used for this purpose, are given the consultation, are given the right money and the value of the land that they will have to give for this railway, and ensure that everything is in order for them? Thank you very much.
I will ensure that the organisations that the Honourable Gentleman has mentioned there are appropriately consulted throughout this process, and we're determined to work as a government in partnership with all stakeholders, landowners, businesses, individuals who are affected. Of course, the Hybrid Bill Select Committee is a quasi-judicial process, but on behalf of my department, I do undertake to make sure all appropriate conversations are happening. Madam Deputy Speaker, alongside this bill, we are also undertaking development work for the connection to Liverpool via Warrington Bank Quay. We will work in partnership with local stakeholders throughout the development process, and the detailed route from Millington to Liverpool will be subject to future consultation. We will determine the consenting route for this part of the line in due course, and will ensure that work on both the eastern and western section of the new Liverpool to Manchester line is fully integrated, and that we do everything we can to ensure that the new line is open for use as soon as possible once Phase 1 of Northern Powerhouse Rail in Yorkshire has completed. Before drawing my remarks to a close, I would just like to express my gratitude to my honourable friends, the member for Easington and for Birmingham, Hall Green and Moseley, and the Honourable Member for Brigg and Immingham for their valuable work to date on the Hybrid Bills Select Committee in the last Parliament. I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. Shadow Minister Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I echo the Secretary of State's thanks for what must have seemed a very thankless task in the Select Committee. Now, this is a slightly odd legislative vehicle, but it is a practical mechanism used by the last government to allow for continued progress on railway improvements to create Northern Powerhouse Rail, and it was moved across 3 sessions of Parliament. The Conservative government of the day decided to carry over this bill to use it as a wrapper to support Northern Powerhouse Rail. It's a project championed by the Right Honourable Member for Richmond and North Allerton during his administration. So it's no surprise to me, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the government has followed his lead in their proposal to carry over today. Back in May 2024, Parliament reduced the scope of a much wider bill to focus solely on NPR. And so the issue now before this House is in fact a very narrow one, whether there is a collective will to progress development of a roughly 15-mile stretch of track as part of this government's plans to progress Northern Powerhouse Rail. And secondly, the House is also being asked to agree to the establishment of a new Select Committee, and that matters very obviously because the bill is a hybrid bill, and it's through the Select Committee process that outstanding petitions from those directly affected will be considered. And it's also the structure through which any additional provisions brought forward by the government to reshape the bill will be scrutinised, and those newly affected, if there are some, by any proposal will be given the opportunity to be heard. So if this bill is to be properly repurposed, it clearly makes sense that the work of the associated Select Committee carries on. The opposition accepts the rationale for allowing the current process to survive the end of this parliamentary term, to give it further time to continue its work. But whilst we agree that the government should continue, it is with increasing concern that I look at the lack of progress that it is actually making. We are, Madam Deputy Speaker, 1.5 years into the Labour administration, and all we got a couple of weeks ago was a fanfare announcement that Labour would commission consultants' reports on how Northern Powerhouse could be built. Not just a few, £275 million worth of reports every year of this Parliament, £1.1 billion of them, but no sign of any significant building works. Real progress has been kicked down the road, perhaps because the Minister knows, the Secretary of State knows, that she does not have the money to do what she has promised. Exactly. HM Treasury has capped Northern Powerhouse Rail at £45 billion, and yet that was the claimed cost back in 2019. That's before COVID, since when we all know that costs have soared. She knows that she doesn't have the money, so she distracts her backbenchers with castle-in-the-air planning, with the taxpayer picking up the bill. I asked the Secretary of State a fortnight ago for clarity, for transparency, even for an indication of how funds were to be reconciled. And she puffed and she puffed and she said she wouldn't be lectured, but she didn't answer the question. We are now none the wiser as to how the government expects to fill the gap. What cuts will she be forced to make? Is it to the high-speed section? Perhaps she could tell the House today. It would have been better for the public to have had that clarity nearly 3 weeks ago than the spectacle of the Secretary of State signing bits of paper on her rail tour of northern cities. We want to see these schemes come on budget and in a timely manner, addressing local concerns so that communities are not just spoken to, but listened to. To get the best possible result for taxpayers, the government needs to avoid overly onerous environmental mitigations that impose huge costs for minimal benefit. They talk of deregulation to speed up the process, but where is the action to deregulate? We need to see the government choosing supply chains based on cost and performance, with the value for money for the taxpayer right at the heart of their decision-making process, bringing costs down while speeding up construction. But we don't see this hard work being done by the government. And we need a government with sufficient backbone to be honest about what it can afford to achieve. There's no sign of that. It is on actual delivery that this government will be judged, not just by me, not just by these benches, but by the public. Right now, they're being let down.
Graham Morris.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and Thank you for calling me to speak in what I believe is a really important debate. And I'm delighted to support the government's motions as we continue to invest and transform our rail network after decades of hollow promises and mismanagement under the party opposite. This bill will allow the government the powers necessary to deliver on Northern Powerhouse Rail, therefore supporting our economy, creating better jobs, delivering new and much needed opportunities right across the northwest of England. I may say from a personal point of view, as a frequent user of rail services in the north of England, it's important to me and to my constituents that the government continues to focus on building capacity, reliability and resilience on one of the busiest rail corridors in the country. The importance of our rail network and infrastructure can't be overstated. Indeed, its success will have a direct impact on economic growth and productivity. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do take the point about the need or the desirability for a cross-party consensus, particularly when we're looking at large infrastructure projects such as this. And indeed, on the 14th of January, this government announced a Northern Powerhouse Rail represented the biggest investment in rail connectivity in the North for a generation, some £45 billion. More generally, I'm pleased that the government's looking at the three-phase approach and its sequencing will ensure our communities benefit as soon as possible. I note that beyond the scope of the committee in phase 1 in my own region in the northeast, work on the business case for the Leamside line is to be taken forward. This is a vital project for connectivity by creating new transport links and promoting wider access to the wider regional and national rail network. I also welcome the proposed upgrades to the lines east of the Pennines, focusing on electrification, an issue that was of great interest and of importance during my time as a member of the House of Commons Transport Select Committee. I'm pleased by the government's overall scale of ambition and real focus on regional rail services. This bill represents an opportunity for new rail investment and infrastructure, delivering new stations and routes, as well as major regeneration projects, levering in private sector investment and creating better links across the northwest of the country, not just north-south, but also east-west. After many years of raised hopes, can I ask my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, to ensure the House that this bill is the most effective means of delivering Northern Powerhouse Rail without any unnecessary delay? I might suggest a thought, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've been here a little while now and I've served on a number of joint committees, mostly pre-legislative committees with members of the House of Lords. And it seems to me, although my good friend, the Honourable Member for Strangford, who's no longer in his place, well, it's very unusual. But he raised valid concerns about representations from the National Farmers Union and others in respect of the route. My experience, having served for a number of years on the previous bill committee, the hybrid bill committee that this Parliament has adopted, not just for HS2 but previously, it's a very, very onerous and time-consuming method. It makes vast fortunes for the bureaucracy and for the lawyers and for the lobbyists. And then the whole process has got to be repeated in the House of Lords. So I just wonder whether it's beyond my pay grade, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I just wonder whether someone further up the tree might give that some thought. Can I just say, again, I'm speeding up. We did get the opportunity to go to Japan on the Transport Select Committee a couple of years ago for 5 days, and we saw the Shinkansen, the high-speed bullet train. And that was conceived, and the bill was passed in the Japanese Parliament, the Diet, I think it's called, in 1959. It was actually it was constructed in 1964 in time for the Tokyo Olympics. So we can't say that sort of democracy, that country doesn't have problems of topography and earthquakes and so on, because it does. And there is a method that doesn't take 10 or 15 years. So anyway, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just say we're approaching a period of transformational change within public transport, but particularly on the railways. Increased capacity and an improved role for freight in taking HGVs off our road network is really important. So I fully support today's motions to carry this bill beyond the end of this parliamentary session and to establish the Bill Select Committee so that we can get Northern Powerhouse Rail charging full steam ahead. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for clarity about what this is and what this isn't. And it is welcome that this is about Northern Powerhouse Rail and the Manchester to Liverpool core of that, a scheme that the Liberal Democrats continue to support. And of course, we hope that this time those dreams for Northern Powerhouse Rail will become reality, given the very slow journey that they've been on since 2014 when first proposed. Now, whilst I understand that what the Secretary of State said, that this isn't about Birmingham to Manchester, I hope that she agrees we are eventually going to need to find an effective solution for transport between the West Midlands and the North West, given the very congested rail network and the M6 being something covered by Chris Rea in one of his songs. But I appreciate that is a debate for another time, but perhaps I can tempt the Secretary of State into suggesting, perhaps revealing when the government intends to bring forward proposals for Birmingham to Manchester improvements. I also share the sentiments of the Honourable Member for Easington and thank him for his work, in that I wonder whether the Secretary of State has a concern that this bill advocates a similar legislative approach as the rest of HS2 for consenting, planning, the route and mitigations, etc. And I wonder what lessons have been or will be learnt from that to ensure that the existential despair that is HS2 will not be repeated when attempting to use this procedure to advance Northern Powerhouse Rail.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to object to high-speed rail Crewe to Manchester Bill carry-over Select Committee motions. Why is there any need to carry this over? To paraphrase Monty Python, this project is no more. It has ceased to be. It has expired and gone to meet its maker. It is a stiff, bereft of life. So why won't everyone accept this project as dead, finito, finished? By continuing with this charade, this government is giving false hope to those who want it to happen, just like it did with the WASPy women, and is causing needless anxiety to those in my constituency who don't want it to happen. Why doesn't the government, rather than faffing about with carry-over motions, acting more carry-on than carry-over, why doesn't it just announce that this project is dead and buried and put it out of its misery once and for all? The government needs to dispose of the properties they have bought and that they are holding onto as well, take them out of safeguarding. It seems the government is only proceeding with this carry-over motion to try to appease the windbag of the North, Andy Burnham. And if they think this futile gesture is going to make sure he plays nicely and supports the Prime Minister, I feel they are sadly deluded. This is another example of the government making the wrong decision for the wrong reasons. They should have learnt by now that such a tactic will always backfire. My constituents were extremely grateful to the former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Richmond, for cancelling this White Elephant project, and this government would do well to follow his lead.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's been a good debate, and I'm very grateful to all the honourable members who have committed. As I said in my introductory remarks, I do believe this first motion and the second one on the order paper represent a really important step forward in delivering Northern Powerhouse Rail. And as my honourable friend, the member for Easington, said, these plans will deliver faster, more frequent rail connections between very fast-growing city regions in the north. That will, of course, enable more jobs, new homes and a greater number of opportunities for businesses to invest and expand. I would just like to pick up on some of the remarks that have been made by honourable members. I do welcome the Shadow Minister's recognition that this is a practical mechanism for taking forward work on Northern Powerhouse Rail in the northwest of England. I do have to say I fundamentally disagree with his characterisation of this government's commitment to Northern Powerhouse Rail. I do say gently to him that it's a bit rich for a party who first talked about Northern Powerhouse Rail in 2014 to criticise this government for investing over £1 billion in this spending review, significantly more than his government ever did during those 12 years since 2024. And it really is his party that was guilty of dither and delay when it came to improving rail infrastructure in the north of England. He claims that we're going to be spending significant money on consultants, but let me tell him that the money that we have allocated in the spending review is to acquire land, it's to do preparatory works on the Yorkshire schemes, those 3 corridors, improving links into Leeds from Bradford, from York, from Sheffield, as well as to plan properly. And we are not, to pick up the point made by the Lib Dem spokesperson, we will not be making the same mistakes as the previous government. We will not be letting contracts when we haven't defined the scope of works, because if he wants to understand why billions of pounds worth of taxpayers' money has been wasted on HS2, he needs to ask some of his colleagues some very, very serious questions as to why the go-ahead was given to HS2 when they didn't know what they were asking the contractors to build. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State, and I'm the first one to accept that there are serious lessons to be learnt from how HS1 was delivered. HS2 was delivered. But what she has so far in her closing remarks failed to mention is how she proposes to deliver all that she has promised within a financial cap of £45 billion, given that the estimate for the works was £46 billion, I think, from memory, back in 2019. What is she not going to do in order to stay within the Treasurer's cap of £45 billion?
Secretary of State.
As I thought I made clear when I gave my statement to the House on Northern Powerhouse Rail a couple of weeks ago, and he made some sarcastic comments about my visit to each of the directly elected mayors along the Northern Growth Corridor, we've agreed that those mayors in those areas will be making local contributions to this scheme, and that, we are ambitious in terms of our plans for a turn-up-and-go railway in the north of England, and we're going to get on with it, unlike his government that never did. The Honourable Lady for Tatton gave us some colourful descriptions of what she thinks this rail scheme is all about, but she couldn't be more wrong. As I said, we have worked closely with leaders in the north of England. We've got a sequenced, credible, phased investment plan for how we are going to improve those rail services so that people aren't stood on platforms when they miss a train worrying that the next one is going to take an hour to arrive. I will give way.
In her announcement, I think the money being put forward was 1.1 billion out of a 45 billion cost. And I think it was to be delivered in decades to come, when the opposite member will no longer, and her government will no longer be around. Hence it is a charade to keep the mayors of the North happy at these local elections.
Secretary of State.
We've been clear that we expect work to start in this Parliament on the Yorkshire package of improvements. We have also said that we expect work to start in the 2030s on the link between Manchester and Liverpool. She will recall that when you look at improvements such as Crossrail in London, from the point at which it was granted consent back in 2007 to the line being opened in 2022, I make that 15 years. You don't build railways overnight. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me conclude. This bill will provide the necessary powers to deliver the section of Northern Powerhouse Rail into Manchester. Progressing this bill today is the most efficient approach, as it makes use of the work that has already taken place. Today's motions will allow the bill to continue its passage through Parliament, and it will allow the invaluable work of the Hybrid Bills Select Committee to recommence, and this is a vital step in the delivery of Northern Powerhouse Rail.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no.
No. Aye.
Division, clear the lobby.
Young officer, and can I convey the condolences of the whole House to his friends and family. Can I also inform the House, as you know, Mr. Speaker, that my honourable friend, the Armed Forces Minister, is today in the Norwegian High North on reservist training. When we said we would boost the reserves, this is the defence team delivering in person. Turning to the question, Mr. Speaker, my message to great British businesses of all sizes is that we want the UK to be the best place in the world to start and grow a defence business. That's why we set a target to spend an extra £2.5 billion with SMEs by 2028. That's an uplift of 50%. This is a Labour government delivering for defence and delivering for Britain.
Samuel. Thank you. Imcross, a company in my constituency of Stroud, is the sole supplier of flight-critical parts to the Typhoon aircraft and a key supplier for the Vanguard's submarine fleet. They are now on the verge of collapse, and HMRC are filing to wind them up after the owners were prohibited from selling their business on the grounds of national security and sovereign capability. So I ask the Minister, what support is he offering to critical suppliers that are struggling financially, and will he meet with me to discuss what steps we can take to support this company?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for championing Imcross in his constituency. I think he will accept that it's right that when British companies that do deliver the sort of sovereign UK capabilities he mentions, that we scrutinise hard any sale to foreign firms. Imcross do indeed play an important role in the Typhoon supply chain and the F-35 supply chain, and my honourable friend, the Minister for Defence, Readiness and Industry, will be happy to meet.
Paul Holmes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Domo, very kind. Domo Tactical Communications in my constituency manufacture drones and communications equipment used around the world. They are having some problems engaging with the MOD on sovereign capability, and the previous Minister of State for Defence Procurement was due to visit them in my constituency, but that meeting has since fallen through since the reshuffle. The Minister on the 25th of November confirmed that he would visit. Can I ask that the meeting is arranged as soon as possible, please?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman points to a firm in his constituency, and it is true that for too long too many small firms have felt locked out of MOD contracts. It is also true that the last government, his government, missed its own targets for SME defence support, and our new office for small business growth that opened its doors for the first time last week will help turn that around. And at the risk of overburdening my honourable friend, the Minister for the Defence Readiness and Industry, I'm sure he'd be willing to meet.
Chair of the Select Committee, Mandelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. UK defence SMEs remain essential to safeguarding our national security. And while drones remain an essential part of modern warfare, so are helicopters. Yet, The Times has reported that our sovereign capability to produce military helicopters could now be under threat because of government indecision as to whether we actually need helicopters or not. Because apparently the Treasury has deemed that they may not be essential to operations going forward. So can the Secretary of State confirm, is it the Ministry of Defence or the Treasury which decides on defence procurement priorities? And also, can he clarify when the decision to award the medium-lift helicopter contract will actually be finally made?
Well, my honourable friend and his committee know a great deal more about this than the Times. He will know that there is a current contract process underway and a competitive process for the new medium-lift helicopter. He will also know that we are working flat out to finalise the Defence Investment Plan, and he will know that as part of that plan, we are dealing with a programme of record, a previous commitment to equipment, which was hugely overcommitted, it was underfunded, and in some cases unsuited to the threats that we face. For the first time for nearly 18 years, this is the Defence Department taking a line by line, building up our plans for the future.
Adam Dance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister recognise that many small and medium-sized enterprises in the defence sector are supported by bigger defence firms? Companies like Honeywell operate on the Leonardo site in Yeovil. Does he therefore accept that if bigger defence firms like Leonardo cannot get contracts like the new medium helicopter contract, we risk losing not just Leonardo but smaller defence firms too?
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman, firms like Leonardo are getting defence contracts. And just the week before last, I was in Edinburgh awarding a £450 million contract to Leonardo for a really important part of upgrading our Typhoon jets for the future. Yes, of course, the honourable gentleman is right. The supply chain to smaller and medium firms is often mediated by primes like Leonardo, which is why it's important that since the election, we have let over 1,100 major contracts in defence, and 84% of those have gone to British-based firms.
James Cartledge, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the opposition, can I associate us with the condolences expressed to the families of Lord Wallace, Lord Flight, and of course the family of Captain Philip Muldowney. Now, Mr. Speaker, last June, from that dispatch box, the Secretary of State promised to deliver the Defence Investment Plan by the autumn. He failed to do so. At our previous orals in December, he promised to work flat out to deliver the DIP by the end of the year. He failed to do so. With continuous dither and delay, is it no surprise that reports last month indicated the worst sentiment among UK defence SMEs for 20 years? The DIP is well overdue. Can he confirm that it will finally be published this month?
We're working flat out to complete the DIP, and he, above all, having been responsible for defence procurement under the last government, will appreciate just how overcommitted his own programme is, will appreciate the truth of his former boss when he said under 14 years the Conservatives have underfunded and hollowed out our armed forces, and we will deal with that overcommitment, we'll deal with the underfunding, and we'll deal with the fact that his plans were unsuited to many of the threats that we face.
James McCleary, Liberal Democrats. Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. We all know that we must increase defence spending urgently, but we are not hearing many ways to get that moving right away without harming British security in other ways, slashing international development aid or investment in renewable energy, for instance, just robbing Peter to pay Paul. The Chief of Defence Staff has warned that there is a £28 billion funding shortfall.
So I want to offer the Secretary of State a practical, costed way to close much of that gap. Defence bonds. This would raise $20 billion over the next 2 years and get investment straight away into capability and the industrial base, including the SMEs we rely on. Will the Secretary of State now give this proposal serious consideration as part of a clear, funded plan to plug the funding gap and get defence investment moving?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I remember when his predecessor stood in this House after the election arguing, like the honourable gentleman opposite did, for this country investing 2.5% of GDP by 2030. The honourable gentleman called for that 13 times before the Prime Minister a year ago said we would do it 3 years earlier than he or the other party. We will look at any potential way of raising the level of investment going into defence. But I just say to the honourable gentleman, he could start by recognising that this is a government that has made a commitment and is making a record investment in defence, the largest increase since the end of the Cold War. And I note that in passing, he seems to be against the way that we will fund this and reach 2.5 and 2.6 next year.
Just to say, we are only on question 1, if you can help me, that will be useful. Toby Perkins.
Question number 2, sir.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'll just take and answer questions 2 and 17 together. 3 weeks ago, I was in Keir. I saw for myself the savagery of Putin's brutal assault on the Ukrainian people, and I saw also their extraordinary defiance. Next week, I will co-chair the 50-nation-strong Ukraine contact group in NATO, and the UK is providing more military support now than ever before, and we will continue to stand united in this House, will continue to stand united in this country, and we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Toby Perkins.
Well, the Defence Secretary is absolutely right to spell out the strength of our commitment. But there is increasing concern about the extent to which China are propping up both the economic and military capabilities of Mr Putin and his barbaric regime. So can the Secretary of State tell me what his latest assessment is of China's contribution to Putin's war machine and what steps we're taking to ensure the international community remains united?
My honourable friend is right to raise this, Mr Speaker, and as a nation, as a government, the UK will not hesitate to act against those that are supplying and funding Putin's war economy. We've sanctioned a range of organisations that operate in third countries over economic and military support for Russia, including 50 Chinese companies. So we'll continue to work across other nations, with other nations, and to bolster the support for Ukraine and the principles of the UN Charter.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In North Warwickshire and Bedworth, many, like Felicitas in Water Orton, have welcomed Ukrainian refugees into their homes, and they've stood by Ukraine, just as this Labour government has. Meanwhile, Reform-led Warwickshire County Council has removed the Ukrainian flag from County Hall, despite public protest. Given the ever-growing threats of Russian aggression, what steps is the UK taking to strengthen its anti-submarine warfare capabilities?
Well, first of all, Mr Speaker, my honourable friend is right that as politicians of any party, we are judged on what we do, not just what we say, and the performance of reform-led councils will certainly come home to roost, I suggest, for his party. But my honourable friend is right, and in this new era of Russian threat, we must ensure that our Royal Navy has the innovation it needs to detect, to track and to deter threats beneath the waves. And so today we've announced a new £40 million contract with a British-based SME to buy new sonar buoys, exactly to be deployed and used beneath the waves to track Putin's subs.
Right, Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, our Ukrainian friends don't just want to physically rebuild after this devastating war, but recover with a modernised, reformed economy that can attract investment and support their entrepreneurial population. Now, this is something Britain can help with, given our strengths in defence, technology and indeed as a global financial centre. So could I ask the government to fully lean into these efforts alongside our allies, the IMF, the World Bank and the private sector, because an economically strong Ukraine is not just good for Ukraine's future security, but ours as well.
The The honourable gentleman is entirely right. A strong Ukraine is the key to a long-term secure Europe. He is also right that British defence, British innovation and British financial muscle can help Ukraine in the medium term. I think he'd also recognise that we can contribute to Ukraine in a unique way, having been, since the start of Putin's brutal invasion, the country that has been Ukraine's closest and most reliable ally under both governments.
Mr. Speaker, as we approach the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine this month, with reports that Russian troops have killed 12 people and injured 17 others after launching a drone strike on civilians just yesterday, the brutality of Putin's war shows no sign of abating. So can the Secretary of State confirm that the UK will not follow any US lead that undermines Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity? And will he commit to maintaining Britain's military support at current levels or above, ensuring that decisions about Ukraine's future remain with Kyiv, not with Washington or Moscow?
Mr. Speaker, Ukraine's sovereignty, its territorial integrity is at the heart of our determination to stand with Ukraine. We are determined to step up our support for Ukraine, and this House will recognise the brutal attack on those mine workers going to work in order to mine the coal to keep their own Ukrainian citizens warm in this unprecedented cold period in Ukraine.
Very tough. Number 3, Mr. Speaker. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pembrokeshire is at the heart of Britain's defence future. I'm excited about the opportunity for local people, and to help deliver that, I'm proud that it is this Labour government working with the Labour government in Wales that are progressing the defence growth deal for Wales that will help prove that defence is an engine for growth right across Wales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's increased investment in the defence sector in Pembrokeshire. It represents a real opportunity for businesses and the local community. Good, well-paid jobs, strong local supply chains, all strengthening our national security. Can the Minister set out what engagements he's had with the local supply chain, as well as any discussions regarding the new munitions and energetics factory in Milford Haven?
Can I thank him? Since I met the honourable gentleman, we've been discussing how we roll out faster the new munitions factories that as a government we're committed to deliver, but also how we can support the growth in skills. And as part of our £182 million for skills in the Defence Industrial Strategy, that includes skills funding for Wales, and the opportunity that the Defence Growth Deal provides is to uplift skills for defence right across Wales, and I'm happy continuing our conversations as to how that can benefit his constituents in Pembrokeshire.
Question 4, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State. Mr. Speaker, as the Strategic Defence Review set out, the High North is becoming more important to the UK and to our NATO allies as it becomes more accessible through climate change. We have Royal Navy deployments in the High North, we have Royal Marines cold weather training in Norway, we have Ranger exercises in Sweden and in Finland. We will continue to step up on Arctic security alongside our NATO and alongside our GEF allies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your words about the late Lord Wallace of Tankerness. Jim Wallace was not just my predecessor in this House, but he was a friend and, in fact, my London flatmate for many years. I'm sure that his family and all those who mourn his passing, especially in the Northern Isles, will appreciate your acknowledgement of his contribution. Through the years of the Cold War, the RAF's radar station at Saxiford in Unst was the front line of our nation's defences to the north. That was drawn down 20 years ago and is now home to the Shetland spaceport. We've seen the recent activities of the Russian tanker Yanta, the interception of the Bella 1, and with space being identified as a priority in the Strategic Defence Review, will the Government now be reassessing the significance of Shetland and its waters as we look to the developing situation in the far north?
Mr. Speaker, we deeply value that the role of Shetland and Scotland in general plays to reinforce the security of the United Kingdom. The fact that there are 9,500 full-time troops in Scotland, the fact there are around 3,000 civilian defence personnel based in Scotland, and the fact that as a government in the last year we put over £2 billion into the Scottish economy to support defence and the role that Scotland plays in general, part of keeping this country safer, but also defence driving economic growth throughout the UK.
Speaker, along with the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, my constituency has an obvious interest in the High North and the defence of the western approaches, and I welcome this £40 million investment in sonar, anti-submarine sonar buoys and Operation Bastion to defend subsea cables across the Atlantic. But can the Minister give us a similar assurance about the integrity of cables and between cables and communications between our islands across the Pentland Firth, the Minch, the Irish Sea and even the Isle of Wight?
Well, my honourable friend points quite rightly to a growing level of Russian activity in particular that monitors and potentially threatens our critical undersea infrastructure. He will see the way that we have demonstrated that we see, we understand and we track those Russian threats, that we're working particularly through GEF allies together to deal with those threats, and we will step up that further in the months ahead.
Calm.
Quiet, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the US remains the UK's principal defence and security partner, and our cooperation on defence, nuclear capability and intelligence remains as close and effective as anywhere in the world, keeping Britain safe in an increasingly dangerous environment. As close friends, we're not afraid to have difficult conversations when we need to. Friends turn up for each other, as we did for the US in Afghanistan, and friends also are honest with each other, as the Prime Minister has set out.
Calm.
Can I ask the Minister and the Secretary of State to consider diverting defence spending away from programmes that do not truly protect the British people? Our nuclear deterrent now consumes nearly a third of the defence budget through Trident, a system that cannot be launched without US approval. In pursuing nuclear deterrence and mutually assured destruction, we have drained funding from conventional forces and neglected diplomacy and development that actually prevents conflicts. So does he believe that prioritising nuclear defence over reducing tensions, ending conflicts and promoting peace genuinely delivers security for our people, and if so, can he explain why?
Can I thank him for his question? I recognise it comes from a different point of view than I think many people in this House and in the wider public as well. Our nuclear deterrent is operationally independent. The only person that can authorise the firing of that is the Prime Minister. It is a part of our security apparatus that keeps us safe every single day and has done for decades. As a government, we're continuing to invest in our nuclear deterrent, as we're investing in jobs and skills right across the country that keep us safe every single day. Our relationship with the United States is a key part of that, but we'll also continue to invest with our relationship with our other allies, especially around Europe as well.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Bury St Edmunds, we have many US servicemen living off base from Lakenheath. They are a huge asset and greatly welcome. Would the Minister agree that the US remains our most essential ally and join me in my gratitude for the service of these brave US servicemen and women, so important for our security?
Can I thank my friend for his question? There are thousands of US personnel stationed in Britain. Their presence here helps keep us safe, as well as protecting American interests as well. We will continue to work closely with our US allies. It is important to do so, and we'll continue to invest in deepening that security partnership with the personnel based here in the United Kingdom to keep us safe in these more dangerous times.
David Reid, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the government admits it cannot ratify the Chagos Treaty without first amending the UK-US agreement on Diego Garcia. But currently, that binding agreement requires Chagos to remain under UK sovereignty until at least 2036. So can the Minister confirm this? If the United States does not agree to amend that treaty, then the UK would be in breach of international law. And more importantly, Mr. Speaker, doesn't this mean that the Chagos giveaway deal is now dead in the water?
I'm sorry he missed my concluding remark at the end of the opposition day last week, but not once did he say why his government started that deal. Not once did he give the details as to the preparatory work that his government was supposed to do to answer his own question there. This deal secures the future of that UK-US base. We will continue working closely with our American allies to progress that deal and to continue those conversations, but I'm afraid all he's asking for here is more uncertainty. We're securing the future of that base. He's just talking it down.
Max Wilkinson.
Number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We entered negotiations on safe participation in good faith. However, no agreement was possible that met our national interests. We will continue to explore cooperation with the EU and its member states that strengthen European security, underpin our NATO first policy, and we're pleased that the government has been able to conclude new defence partnerships with our European partners, including France and Germany.
Wilkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer. Doesn't this go back to the key problem that faces us as a nation? It's the failed Brexit bestowed upon us by the previous government and their friends in the Reform Party. Ministers have my sympathy in trying to unpick this mess, but they're going too slowly. Brexit is clearly the biggest barrier to us participating in this scheme. Is it now obvious that our best economic interests and our national security are best served by a more rapid reintegration with the European Union?
The biggest security threat facing the United Kingdom is Russia, and we're responding to that by deepening our alliances right across the NATO alliance, especially with our European friends. We will continue to do so. We weren't able to conclude the safe negotiations in a manner that was consistent with the objectives we set out when we started that work, but we will continue to work with them because they're not just our European friends, they're our NATO allies. Their security is our security, and we take that very seriously.
Calvin Bailey.
Mr. Speaker, building European strategic autonomy is vitally important to deter Putin from further attacks upon us. But this is completely undermined by attacks on NATO, the bedrock of our security, by the Green Party. Does my right honourable friend agree that when our alliances are undermined for superficial political gain, they are, in essence, doing the work of Putin?
For that question. The honourable gentleman is right. In the space of 1 minute, the Green Party leader veered from reforming NATO to pulling out altogether. The growing era of threat is far too serious for this kind of student union make-it-up-as-you-go-along politics, and the only person cheering the rank amateurism of the Green Party leader is sat in the Kremlin. Labour is the party of NATO, and we will stand by that steadfast support for the alliances that keep us all safe every single day.
The rundown person, James McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was reported last night that the Prime Minister wants a closer defence partnership with Europe, and that last November's talks on UK access to the EU's €150 billion Safe Defence Fund collapsed, with France reportedly driving the impasse by demanding an inflated price for UK entry, despite many EU partners wanting to open UK participation. With the UK being Europe's largest defence producer and a unique security partner, not just another third country, will the Secretary of State now reopen negotiations, urge the Prime Minister to raise this directly with President Macron, perhaps in their reported WhatsApp group, and publish the government's cost-benefit analysis for joining SAFE, including the entry price it judges acceptable?
Well, can I thank him for his question? I too want a closer defence partnership with Europe. It's why we set that out with the EU reset announced by the Prime Minister. We'll continue working closely, not just with the European Union, but the European Union member states, the majority of whom are NATO members, that will be able to support their security. We are an important player in the international defence scene, and it's important that UK businesses are able to access markets, not just for economic growth purposes, but because it keeps them safe as well.
Vokes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 7.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 7 and 16 together. I thank the honourable members for their questions. Veterans across this country are benefiting from record levels of investment. The new veteran strategy celebrates our remarkable veterans as a vital national asset, with £50 million for Valour and £12 million for the Reducing Veteran Homelessness Programme, alongside Operations Courage, Restore, Fortitude, Ascend and Nova. We are committed to ensuring our veterans can easily access support they deserve when and where they need it.
Vokes.
Veterans in my constituency benefit from the stellar Monmouthshire Veterans Support Hub in Abergavenny. Organisations like this and the volunteers that keep them running are invaluable to our communities. We also have excellent branches of the Royal British Legion and a veterans-informed GP service in Monmouth. As the government's Valour programme gets underway, will the Secretary of State accompany me when I next visit the Monmouthshire Veterans Hub, not only to sample their brilliant breakfast fry-up, but also to see the brilliant examples of what can be achieved by these support hubs?
It's truly wonderful to hear the great work being done in her constituency to support veterans. And far be it from me to get in between the Secretary of State and a fry-up, but I may, if I can, take his place on a visit.
John Whitby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister what assessment she's made of the adequacy of housing provision for military veterans, particularly for those with service-related injuries or disabilities, in rural areas like Derbyshire Dales, where there is severe pressure on our affordable and supported housing stock?
I thank the Honourable Member for that question, and he raises a very important point. Those veterans who choose to resettle in rural areas may face additional challenges to access the services that they deserve. This government is committed to reducing veterans' homelessness, and I note the £12 million that we have spent to do so.
On his birthday, Lincoln John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister whose job it is to protect and enhance the moral component of fighting power?
I thank the honourable and gallant member for that question, and happy birthday. I think that to protect the moral component of fighting power is a duty that is, of course, on those of us who have the huge privilege of serving as ministers in this government. And indeed, I'm sure that every officer would also know that they have a role to play as well.
Ms Summer Roberts.
The Veterans Commissioner for Wales has said that veteran support to tackle substance abuse, mental health crisis and also residential services do not exist within the NHS in Wales as they do within the NHS in England. So what steps is she taking to work with the Commissioner and with the Welsh Government to improve access to these essential services? And will she encourage veterans to attend my event in Caernarfon on Sunday, which brings a host of key support organisations together?
I thank the Honourable Member for her question and echo the excellent job she's done to promote her event. Of course, my commitment to veterans goes across this entire nation, and we must do what we can, where we can, to ensure that veterans, wherever they are located, can access the support that they need. I know that some of the matters she refers to are devolved, but I, of course, work with all of my counterparts across the devolved administrations to deliver.
Shadow Minister Mark Francois.
Thank you, sir. We had hoped to see the Armed Forces Minister here today, but we accept that he is on manoeuvres. More seriously, we learnt last week... Thank you, sir. We learnt last week that the Prime Minister's interest in British Army veterans once even stretched to working with disgraced lawyer Phil Shiner to help prosecute them. What's the Minister's reply to the subsequent comment from General Sir Peter Wall, former head of the British Army, who said of those actions, and I quote, "If that's the Prime Minister's moral stance, then one has to ask questions about how compatible that is with his job of making decisions about putting soldiers in harm's way in the national interest for the defence of the realm." What's the answer to the former Chief of the General Staff about that?
I know that the Honourable Member who played such an who played such a pivotal role in the previous government's disastrous record on looking after these armed forces, whether it was overseeing horrendous decline in accommodation, real-term cuts to military pay, or indeed the hollowing out and underfunding of armed forces. So I know he is not a details man, but I would just gently remind him that the Prime Minister did not work with that individual or with any organisation, and his role was limited. His role was limited to working with the Law Society on points of law. He actually has a record of representing people who were wrongfully accused or killed on operations.
Mark Francois.
Try this for detail. Why should any British soldier, past or present, or those who commanded them, owe loyalty to a Labour government which contains an Attorney General who once willingly represented Gerry Adams, or a Prime Minister who once wrote a legal treatise on how best to prosecute them under the ECHR? Why, before he was elected to Parliament, did our Prime Minister agree to take formal legal instructions from Phil Shiner, a man hated throughout the British Army for his years of false claims against veterans, for which he was subsequently convicted as a fraudster and struck off. What kind of politicians support our soldiers by helping to sue them?
I think it is well known in this House that the Prime Minister was a human rights lawyer and so obviously wrote in connection with that. I think what really stands testament to the Prime Minister's support for veterans is the fact that this government is delivering record spending for veterans. Yeah. We're rolling out the 50 million Valor hubs, and I think that speaks for itself.
Question number 8, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've paused IOC for Ajax until the investigations into the safety incidents have concluded. Let me be clear, I want the MOD and our forces to be bold, to innovate and challenge, but they must never compromise on safety. We're preparing a recommendation on next steps with Ajax, and I'll keep this House informed, as I have done since the Excise Titan storm on the 22nd November last year.
And the best objection. Mr. Speaker, the Minister knows I have a keen interest in this topic. Obviously, we know that there were 33 injuries sustained during Excise Titan storm. Initial operating capability for Ajax was achieved by General Dynamics on the 23rd of July. And between the 23rd of July and Excise Titan storm on the 22nd November, there were 3 other excises: Excise Scorpion Cyclone, Excise Cyclone Storm and Excise Tradewind. I wrote to the Minister last year in a written question and asked him how many injuries were sustained, and I'm yet to receive a response. Could he confirm how many instances of noise and vibration injuries were sustained on those 3 exercises, and whether there were any injuries that resulted prior to him signing off IOC on the 5th of November?
As the Member of Parliament who PQs the MOD the most, it's good to know that he keeps track of all his questions. I'm certain I have replied to that, but I will check when I get back to the Department to make sure he has it. We are looking at all the incidents from Titan Storm and suggestions of incidents and potential injuries previously. The injuries under the last government are well documented, but to get to the bottom of what happened and why that information did not flow to ministers ahead of the IOC declaration, we've instigated a number of investigations. I'll continue to keep the House updated with the progress.
Number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Under plans set out in the Defence Housing Strategy, 90% of military homes will be upgraded, renewed or rebuilt. This strategy is backed by a record £9 billion investments over a decade, work which will be driven by the Defence Housing Service. We've also already rapidly improved military homes by delivering our charter commitments, including transforming 1,000 of the very worst homes.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the new publicly owned Defence Housing Service, which is already improving conditions for service families by bringing 4,688 of the 5,088 military homes in the Eastern region back into public ownership for upgrade and renewal. Does the Minister agree that we must continue investing in our armed forces, the backbone of our national security, and that after years of neglect under the last government, Labour's £9 billion military housing strategy is finally delivering the homes and support our service families deserve?
Well, my honourable friend is quite right to point out that under the previous government, forces families were severely let down in regards to housing. Under the plans set out under the Defence Housing Strategy, he rightly notes 90% of military homes will be upgraded, renewed or indeed rebuilt.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister very much for that answer. Minister, there's a massive improvement, of course, in forces housing, but there is one at Ballykinler. It's been lying vacant, I understand, Mr. Speaker, for 5 years. It's heated. There's new windows in. There's been lots of work done. I've written to the MOD asking this question: is it not possible with the properties that are not being used that they get used for another purpose? For instance, it could be used for youth camps, for youth groups. It could be social housing as well, because it's secure within Ballykinler. It's a specific question. The Minister may not be able to answer, but I very much appreciate an answer back on that. Thank you so much.
I thank him for his question. As he will be aware, I can't update on that specific instance, but I will get an answer for him. And we are exploring how we can make best use of the existing estate.
Question number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'd like to answer questions 10 and 22 together. The government's already making the largest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, with plans to hit in April 2027 2.6% of GDP on defence and 3% in the next Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Britain is facing a once-in-a-generational threat to our national security, with Putin's war continuing in Europe and growing uncertainty about the future reliability of the United States. Will the Secretary of State therefore take up the Liberal Democrats' proposal to issue time-limited defence bonds, allowing the public to invest directly in modernising our armed forces, raising billions for new equipment, while ensuring strong parliamentary oversight of how that money is spent?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I note the arguments that he and his party are now making, but it was just in autumn 2024 that the Lib Dems were calling for this government to set a pathway to 2.5%. And, Mr. Speaker, we went further than that with the largest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, 3 years before he was calling for it. And we have a plan, of course, to hit 3% in the next Parliament.
Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate what the Defence Secretary has just said, but with President Trump attempting to tear apart the international alliances that have kept us safe for decades, with Putin waging war in Ukraine for almost 4 years, the world is changing fast, and we need to come together as patriots to decide how we can best invest in the defence of our country as quickly as possible. So can I press him again to convene cross-party talks on how we can reach 3% of GDP on defence quickly and ensure defence bonds are part of the solution?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd welcome the support in the first instance from her and her party for the fact that in this Parliament we will spend £270 billion investing in defence to keep Britain safe and our alliances secure for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that is delivering for defence, and it is delivering for Britain.
Morrison.
Question number 11, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Veterans of Operation Banner, like all veterans, are benefiting from record levels of investment by this government. The new veterans strategy celebrates our remarkable veterans with £50 million for Valour and £12 million for reducing the Veterans Homelessness Programme.
Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today was my brother's birthday. He was a veteran who died at age 36, and he would be proud that today I'm talking about the 250,000 veterans of Operation Banner. And they put their lives at risk to fight to keep us safe and free. And those veterans deserve our support. So will the minister explain why the government no longer believes those veterans deserve to be protected from years more lawfare?
I note the service of her brother. As she well knows, this government is bringing in real protections for veterans, and if she wishes to support legislation that gives blanket immunity to terrorists, that is, of course, her prerogative.
Question 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
To deter and defeat aggression, this government is investing in innovation and the latest capabilities for our forces. R&D is critical to maximising defence ability to be an engine for growth, and it's this government that's ensured 10% of our equipment plan must be spent on novel technologies, and we have introduced a £400 million Defence Innovation Fund.
Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. He will know that investment in defence R&D has tremendous impacts on the UK economy as well, not only jobs and crowding in private investment, but spillover effects of new technologies helping Britain to prosper. So, given that, isn't it clear that if the government was to issue defence hypothecated bonds, it would make a brilliant return for the British taxpayer too?
Well, can I thank him for his question? He's absolutely right that defence innovation has considerable spillover positive effects for the wider economy. It's one of the reasons why, as a government, we're investing in technologies that have dual-use potential, not just to give our fighting forces the equipment they need, but wider benefits for the wider economy. He will have heard what the Secretary set out in terms of defence spending, but I welcome his support for defence innovation and investment in R&D.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the last few months, the member for Bournemouth West and I have been campaigning for a new drone centre to be designated at the Dorset Innovation Park. Now, the park already hosts a strong defence ecosystem for testing, developing and researching drone technology. Alongside this, of course, the county has a well-established network of colleges and universities in Bournemouth, Poole and Weymouth, offering the skills that we need to make this a success. So with all this in mind, will the Minister continue to work with myself and all the relevant stakeholders to establish a drone centre at the Dorset Innovation Park, which I know will help to strengthen national security and, of course, secure good jobs? Sorry.
As a fellow West Country MP, can I tell him I recognise the ambition and the determination he has to see more of that innovative technologies, autonomy, drones and other types of new novel technologies create good jobs in his community. I know that he's been speaking to not only myself but the Armed Forces Minister who leads on drones around this, and I wish the businesses in his constituency and the wider region the very best as they innovate to provide our armed forces with the kit they need.
Question number 13, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has stepped up our support for naval shipbuilding. We've secured the largest shipbuilding export in British history, with the Type 26 being sold to Norway, invested in strategically important infrastructure and are driving naval programmes in UK shipyards. The Shipbuilding and Maritime Technology Action Plan will set out our future ambitions to support naval and civilian shipbuilding and maritime technology sectors.
Richard Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I thank the Minister for his response. White Shipyard and Diverse Marine in my constituency do absolutely fantastic work, and they thoroughly welcome the launch of the new dedicated unit to help ensure small defence companies can access MOD contracts. However, given the recent news that a £200 million contract has been awarded to the Dutch firm Damon, what assurances can the Minister offer to companies like White Shipyard and Diverse Marine that they will have a fair and credible route into competing for these major programmes?
Minister.
For his question, Serco have indeed awarded a contract to Damon as part of their provision of tugs for the UK military. We've set out very clearly, Mr. Speaker, our intention that more of our rising defence budget should be spent with British companies, supporting the construction of more naval assets in British shipyards. We'll continue to do so, not just supporting Type 26s and Type 31s being built in Scottish shipyards, but as we move to a hybrid navy, more platforms being built in shipyards right across the United Kingdom.
In room.
Speaker, we could better invest in naval shipbuilding if the government listens to a report that's been published by the National Audit Office, which estimates £1.5 billion a year of defence spending is lost to fraud, and that the Ministry of Defence recovers only 48p in every pound spent on counter-fraud work, less than other departments. What will the Minister do to ensure more of that funding can be recovered for our national defence?
For raising this question, let's be absolutely clear. Any money lost to fraud is people taking money away from our national security and our national defences, and it is unacceptable. As a department, we're looking at how we improve and continuously improve our anti-fraud measures. We'll continue to do that, and as we roll out increased defence spending, it is even more important that we spend this wisely.
Cameron Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, question 14, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The United Kingdom's nuclear deterrent is completely operationally independent. Only the Prime Minister can authorise the firing of the UK's nuclear weapons, and even if they're deployed as part of a wider NATO response, £15 billion is being invested in the Sovereign Warhead programme over the course of this Parliament.
Cameron Thomas.
Speaker, if the government wants to make an inroad to the EU Safe Fund via Emmanuel Macron, it could do worse than recognise the foresight of Charles de Gaulle, whose suspicion of the US has been fully vindicated by Washington's national security strategy. Now, the French nuclear deterrent is the only truly independent nuclear deterrent. What steps is the government taking to minimise the UK's reliance on the US for nuclear deterrent servicing?
Can I thank him for his question? Our nuclear deterrent is operationally independent. It supports thousands of jobs up and down the country. We'll continue to invest in the skills required and the technologies required to keep our continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent at sea. We'll continue to invest in that sovereign capability, but we'll continue to participate across defence programmes with our partners, both in the United States and in Europe.
Question 15, please, Mr. Speaker.
Who's doing it? Minister.
For her question. Armed Forces families absolutely do a vital role in supporting our members of our armed forces to do the role of defending our national security. We are, with our Valour Hubs, our ambitions is that our Valour Hubs will seek to not only support veterans, but also support wider members of our armed forces communities, including families.
Mr. Speaker, another important factor in supporting our brave troops is the provision of military clothing. The last government, the Conservatives, tied us into a contract for around 90% of army clothing is currently secured through overseas suppliers and a significant amount from China. As the MP for Hyndburn, the home of textiles, I have many businesses eager to meet the needs of our British military troops. And so will the Minister review this in order to look at whether British companies can supply these British needs?
Sorry a minute. Can you say you can weave it in? Because it is about families, and I think this is about supply of garments, isn't it? Good luck. Let's have a look.
I know that armed forces families will be very concerned about the kits that their loved ones are wearing. And I know the majority of our clothing is sourced from British companies, but I'm sure my colleague will be happy to speak to her about this issue in more depth.
Alicia Kears.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's over a year since I raised the 5,700 women who were wrongly and unfairly dismissed from the armed forces for falling pregnant while in service. So please can the Minister update me what she has done in that time to make sure they get their caps and berries back that they absolutely deserve, because we should be supporting those who want to have families in the armed services.
She rightly raises a very important point. I have had updates from officials on this matter, and I will push for a further timeline to update her on.
We come to topicals. Rebecca Smith.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Stay.
Mr. Speaker, this month marks 4 years since Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and the Ukrainian people continue to fight with huge defiance and courage, recently retaking parts of Kupiansk city, striking military targets deep in Russia, and reporting a Russian casualty rate of 25-1 in some parts of the front line. Putin is increasingly under pressure. He's thrown 17,000 North Korean troops into the fight and recruited thousands more from Africa and other nations. 4 years on, the Ukrainian courage will be matched by our UK determination. Next week I'll travel to NATO. I'll co-chair the 33rd meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, where 50 nations will step up the provision of military aid and support to keep them in the fight.
Mr. Speaker, ministers stress how keen they are to remove obstacles hampering defence innovation, and nowhere is this more important than in my South West Devon constituency, home to the majority of Plymouth's National Centre for Marine Autonomy. Now, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency has spent the last 12 months or more looking at how to remove licensing obstacles for autonomous vessels like underwater drones. Given Plymouth's marine autonomy sector is set to receive a share of the £250 million defence growth deal, will the Secretary of State commit to putting further pressure on the Government Legal Service or whoever else it will take to get the legislation in place to update the MCA's Workboat Code 3 as a matter of urgency?
The Honourable Lady makes an important point, and the doubling of our investment in this Parliament into autonomy will be directed in significant part towards marine technology. Her part of the world in the southwest plays a leading role in this, and she urges action across government, and I hope she'll see that the shipbuilding and marine autonomy plan that we publish shortly will show exactly what we're doing on a number of fronts.
Stop them.
I was appalled when visiting UK service personnel overseas at NATO airbase to learn that many have been penalised by their home insurer by virtue of being posted abroad, despite the fact that these companies were signed up to the Forces Covenant. Now, this goes against the very principle of the Covenant, so I was glad after writing to many home insurance companies that a few, including Aviva and Hastings, have changed this policy. But does the Minister agree with me that if insurers are going to sign up to the Covenant, they need to make sure they're living up to every single part of its important principles?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point. I know that over 14,000 private organisations have signed the Armed Forces Covenant, and a core principle of that covenant is that service personnel should face no disadvantage compared to other citizens in the provision of public and commercial services. I'm glad that some insurance companies have taken steps to address this particular issue, and I would urge all businesses to ensure their policies fully support the armed forces community and reflect their commitment to the covenant.
So, Secretary of State James Cotledge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, last August, the Deputy Prime Minister of Mauritius said that when they take sovereignty over the Chagos Islands, nuclear weapons could no longer be stored there. In last week's Chagos debate, in answer to our repeated questioning as to whether this was true, the DRI Minister replied 3 times by reading Annex 1 of the treaty, whereby it grants, and I quote, unrestricted ability to control the storage of all goods, including but not limited to fuels, weapons and other hazardous materials. Does the use of the word weapons in that sentence of the treaty definitely include nuclear weapons?
Mr. Speaker, I've read it to him 3 times. Do I have to read it to him a 4th time for him to start understanding this? No wonder that they don't want to admit they started the negotiations over Diego Garcia. They don't want anyone knowing that because they're clearly not prepared for it, unlike this government that's securing that base.
James Carter.
Well, it's interesting that the Secretary of State passed responsibility for answering the question to the Minister next to him. But he didn't answer the question. This is of profound national importance, Mr. Speaker. For us in the United States, these are our most
readiness bill will be ready, and when he expects it to gain royal assent.
The Defence Readiness Bill was set out in the Strategic Defence Review. We're looking across government as to how we can bolster readiness measures, not just legislative ones, but in policy changes, removing stupid rules, spending more. The Defence Readiness Bill will be something that we're looking to implement later on in this Parliament. The Armed Forces Bill is before this House now, and that's where our immediate focus lies.
Mr. Speaker, Task Force Kindred has been a fantastic success of this government. Can the Secretary of State outline if there are plans to extend the programme and how defence SMEs can get on board with it?
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker. Task Force Kindred has been at the heart of the UK's rapid response and our reliability as Ukraine's closest ally since Putin first invaded Ukraine nearly 4 years back. It will continue to play a central role in the future, and it has lessons for the way that we need to procure and provide our own kit and own systems for our forces too.
Final question, Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Instead of constantly pushing back the closure date for RAF Halton, in an era where we need to increase defence capability, will the Secretary of State actually commit to keeping RAF Halton open for the long term?
The honourable gentleman will know we inherited a base closure programme from the party opposite when they are in government, with announced closures right across the country. We're looking carefully at what bases we have, how we can use them for military need, and where we can dispose of them, making sure that we can build houses for our armed forces and veterans on that land.
Point of order, Mark Francis.
Thank you, Speaker. I fear the Veterans Minister, who's still here, may have earlier inadvertently misled the House. According to House of Lords legal records, from the 29th to the 31st of October 2007, in the Al Jeddah case held before the Lords of Appeal in Ordinary, a case against British soldiers, the applicants were represented by several QCs, including the then Prime Minister, who were instructed, it's in the records, by public interest lawyers Phil Shiner's law firm. Would the Minister or the Prime Minister care to correct the record?
Right, honourable gentleman, I will set the record straight, including his remarks before the House this afternoon.
We've had enough of trying to continue this debate. It no ends. We're now coming to the statements. We'll just let the front bench change over. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll update the House on my visit last week to China and Japan, where we delivered for the British people. Mr. Speaker, with events overseas directly impacting on our security and the cost of living, I made it a founding principle of this government that after years of isolationism, Britain would face outwards once again. This was an 18-month strategy to rebuild our standing, and we have delivered, strengthening our US relationship with our world-first trade deal, resetting our relationship with the EU, striking a groundbreaking FTA with India, and now thawing our ties with China to put this relationship on a more stable footing for the long term. Mr. Speaker, China is the second biggest economy in the world, including Hong Kong. It's our third biggest trading partner, supporting 370,000 British jobs, and it is an undeniable presence in global affairs. It would be impossible to safeguard our national interests without engaging with this geopolitical reality. Yet we inherited a policy from the previous government, not of engagement with China, but hiding away and sticking their heads in the sand. While our allies developed a more sophisticated approach, they let the UK fall behind. We became an outlier. Of my three predecessors, none held a single meeting with President Xi. For 8 years, no British Prime Minister visited China. 8 years of missed opportunities. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, over that period, President Macron visited China 3 times, German leaders 4 times, the Canadian Prime Minister was there a few weeks ago, Chancellor Merz and President Trump are both due to visit shortly. In this context, refusing to engage would be a derelict.
Order! Mr. Klugendart, you will be withdrawing that remark. You will withdraw it. Thank you. Can we calm it down, because I'm sure you'll be wanting to catch my eye. And I would like to hear what you're going to say, so let's not ruin the opportunity. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in this context, refusing to engage would be a dereliction of duty, leaving British interests on the sideline. And incredibly, some in this House still advocate that approach. But, Mr. Speaker, leaders do not hide. Instead, we engage. And we do so on our own terms, because, like our allies, we understand that engagement makes us stronger. Mr. Speaker, protecting our national security is non-negotiable. We're clear-eyed about the threats coming from China in that regard, and we will never waver in our efforts to keep the British people safe. That is why we've given our security services the updated powers and tools that they need to tackle foreign espionage activity wherever they find it, and tackle malicious cyber activity as well. But the fact is, Mr. Speaker, we can do 2 things at once. We can protect ourselves whilst also finding ways to cooperate. And it was in that spirit that we made this visit. I had extensive discussions over many hours with President Xi, Premier Li and other senior leaders. The discussions were positive and constructive. We covered the full range of issues, from strategic stability to trade and investment, opening a direct channel of communication to deliver in the national interest, enabling us to raise frank concerns about activities that impact our national security at the most senior levels of the Chinese system. We agreed to intensify dialogue on cyber issues, and we agreed a new partnership on climate and nature, providing much-needed global leadership on this vital issue. And, Mr. Speaker, I raised a number of areas of difference which matter deeply to this country. I raised the case of Jimmy Lai and called for his release, making clear the strength of feeling in this House. Those discussions will continue. And my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, is in touch with Mr. Lai's family to provide further briefing. I raised our human rights concerns in Xinjiang and Tibet. We discussed Taiwan, wider regional stability, Iran and the Middle East. I called on China to end economic support for Russia's war effort, including companies providing dual-use technologies. And I urged them to use their influence on Putin to push for the much-needed ceasefire in Ukraine. And, Mr. Speaker, I also raised the fact that members of this House have been sanctioned by the Chinese authorities. In response, the Chinese have now made it clear that all such restrictions on parliamentarians no longer apply. And I want to be clear, this was not the result of a trade.
Exactly.
Yes, members will want to see more, I understand that. But that is precisely the point. Ignoring China for 8 years achieved nothing. This step is an early indication, not the sum total, of the kind of progress that this sort of engagement can achieve, through leader-to-leader discussion on sensitive issues, to stand up for British interests. Mr. Speaker, my visit was also about creating new opportunities for British businesses to deliver jobs and growth for the British people. We took with us a brilliant delegation of nearly 60 businesses and cultural powerhouses, the very best of British, as an embodiment of what this country has to offer. If anyone's in doubt as to why this matters, I urge them to spend a few minutes with any one of those businesses. They will tell you about the incredible potential there and the importance of getting out there and accessing the market. And we made significant progress, paving the way to open the Chinese market for British exports, including our world-leading services sector. We secured a 30-day visa-free travel for all Brits, including business travellers. We secured China's agreement to halve whisky tariffs from 10% to 5%. This is worth £250 million to the UK over the next 5 years. A significant win for our iconic whisky industry, particularly in Scotland. And, Mr. Speaker, that lower tariff comes into force today. In total, we secured £2.3 billion in market access wins, including for financial services, £2.2 billion in export deals for British companies, and hundreds of millions worth of new investments. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we agreed to work together in some key areas of law enforcement. Last year, around 60% of all small boat engines used by smuggling gangs came from China. So we struck a border security pact to enable joint law enforcement action to disrupt that supply at source. We also agreed to scale up removals of those with no right to be in the United Kingdom and to work together to crack down on the supply of synthetic opioids. We will continue to develop our work across all these areas because, Mr. Speaker, this is the start of the process, not the end of it. My visit was not just about coming back with these agreements. It was about the wider question of setting this relationship on a better path, which allows us to deal with issues and seize opportunities in a way that the previous government failed to do. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me say a word about my meetings in Tokyo. Japan remains one of our closest allies. Together, we're the leading economies in the CPTPP, partners in the G7, the G20, and the Coalition of the Willing. And they are the UK's largest inward investor outside the United States and Europe. So I had an extremely productive meeting with the Prime Minister as we set out our shared priorities to build an even deeper partnership in the years to come. That includes working together for peace and security, supporting Ukraine as we work for a just and lasting peace, and deepening our cooperation in cutting-edge defence production, including through GCAP. We discussed how we can boost growth and economic resilience by developing our cooperation, first in tech and innovation, where we are both leaders, second in energy, where Japan is a major investor in the UK, and third in trade, where we're working together to maintain the openness and stability that our businesses depend on. That includes expanding the CPTPP and deepening its cooperation with the EU. We will take all of this forward, Mr. Speaker, when I welcome the Prime Minister to Chequers later this year. So, Mr. Speaker, this is Britain back at the top table at last, facing outward, replacing incoherence and isolationism with pragmatic engagement, replacing naive posturing with the national interest. In dangerous times, we're using our full strength and reach on the world stage to deliver growth and security for the British people, and I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement, but it is utterly reprehensible that he began it by accusing the previous government of isolationism. The same Conservative government... Oh, the Business Secretary is laughing. Oh, just that, we'll tell him. The same Conservative government that led the world in our response to the invasion of Ukraine, that signed a vital strategic alliance in AUKUS. The Business Secretary is asking how many FTAs. We signed Britain's biggest post-Brexit trade deal, the CPTPP, bringing us closer to the 11 Indo-Pacific nations, including Japan. He asks, I know about that deal because I signed it myself. And so I welcome the Prime Minister's efforts to collaborate more with our long-standing ally, Japan. But let's turn to China. Of course Britain should engage with China, even though the Chancellor wasn't allowed to go, even though they are an authoritarian state who seek to undermine our interests, even though they spy on us, sometimes within the walls of this building, even though they fund regimes around the world hostile to our country, they are a fact of life, a global power and an economic reality. So let me be clear. It is not the Prime Minister engaging with China that we take issue with. What we are criticising is his supine and short-termist approach. I'm sure the Prime Minister means well, but his negotiating tactic has always been to give everything away in the hope that people will be nice to him in return. Before the Prime Minister even got on the plane, he'd already shown that he would do anything to demonstrate his good relationship with China. But China uses every interaction to improve its own position. The Prime Minister looked like he enjoyed his trip. In fact, it looked like a dream come true for a man who was virtually a communist most of his life. But apart from the... Mr. Speaker, apart from the Labubu doll in his suitcase, and I hope he's checked it for bugs, he has come back with next to nothing. We all want cheaper tariffs for Scottish whisky, but if the Prime Minister bothered to speak to the whisky industry like I did 2 weeks ago, he would know that what they really need is cheaper energy and lower taxes. What else did he get? Visa-free travel. China already offers this to other countries. It's not big enough for a prime ministerial visit. But the worst thing, Mr. Speaker, the worst thing was the Prime Minister claiming a glorious triumph with the lifting of sanctions on 4 Conservative MPs, as if he'd done us a favour. Let me tell him, those MPs were sanctioned because they stood up to China. They stood up against human rights abuses. They stood up against the country spying on our MPs in a way that he wouldn't dare. Those people don't want to go to China. The Chinese know that. They know that they are giving him something that costs absolutely nothing. Why can't the British Prime Minister see that? And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, and the whole House, like with the Chagos Islands, the Prime Minister has been played. China is about to build an enormous spy hub in the centre of London, a ransom he had to pay before he could even get on the plane. I would never allow Britain to be held over a barrel like that. Yet again, the Prime Minister has negotiated our country into a weaker position in the world. His entire economic policy is to tax business more, regulate them harder, and make energy so expensive that we deindustrialise. And then we can import Chinese wind turbines, Chinese solar panels, Chinese batteries for electric vehicles, all manufactured in a country that is building a coal-fired power station every other week. Did he speak to them about that? What did his trip achieve for Jimmy Lai? Nothing. Did China promise to stop fueling Putin's war machine in Ukraine? Doesn't sound like it. What did this trip achieve for the Uyghurs who are being enslaved? Absolutely nothing. Have China agreed to stop their relentless cyber attacks? Have they? We all know the answer to that. The reality is that China showed its strength and Britain was pushed around, literally. It is no wonder, Mr. Speaker, that President Xi praised the Labour Party because the Conservatives stood up for Britain. We don't get pushed around. Britain is a great trading nation. Of course we should engage with other countries, even hostile ones.
Order. Mr. Kyle, you said to me when you go into China how well you will behave. Oh, you all be a big thank you. You're not showing it today. Come here, Ben. No?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not worried about the business secretary. The entire business community thinks he's a joke and doesn't know what he's talking about. So, as I was saying, Of course, we should engage with other countries, even hostile ones, but we need to do so with our eyes open and from a position of strength. And that requires a Prime Minister and a government that puts our national interest first.
Mr. Speaker, let me see if I understand her position. This is the Leader of the Opposition who said we should empty chair the most important NATO summit for years, who wouldn't turn up to the G7, who would rip up our valuable trade deals with the US, India and the EU. This is the Leader of the Opposition who characterised Greenland as a second-order issue, then undermined the government's position on sovereignty. And when it comes to China, her policy is to stick her head in the sand, unable to influence anything. In a volatile world, that is not policy, that's an abdication of responsibility. No wonder her front bench are leaving in droves. And Mr. Speaker, she talks of the embassy. China's had an embassy in the UK since 1877. It's currently spread across 7 sites. The Leader of the Opposition is so busy trying to hold her party together, she's clearly not read the letter for Security and Intelligence Services. But, Mr. Speaker, she claims great interest in the China embassy. She was offered an invite for a Privy Council briefing on the issue. What did she do? She chose not to attend. Mr. Speaker, that's a dereliction.